Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Greetings.
Hello. Sorry, it took me a while to get logged in.
No worries. Friend, welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. We have Kevin from the Americans for Election. Exciting things this organization is doing. So let us get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Sure. I'm Dr. Kevin W. Jennings. I grew up kind of all over the world, but finally settled in Austin, Texas, which I believe is where you are, correct?
Yes,
Awesome.
Exactly.
I love Austin. I miss Austin. I'm no longer there, but what a great place to grow up. And I went to Texas State University, go Bobcats, for degrees in anthropology and criminal justice, and ended up getting my PhD in criminal justice there. And while I was there, I really kind of had a political awakening, I guess you would call it. My parents were always very political and very kind of involved in things. To this day, they still are. And you know, when you're young, teenage years, you kind of do that natural teenager thing of like rejecting what your parents want you to do. So I always just kind of ignored politics and issues, national kind of issues like that, until I got to college and really had my eyes opened about, you know, what's going on in the world around us. This was 9/11, and then the invasion of Iraq, and the economic collapse in 2007. You know, all these things kind of happened while I was in those kind of formative college years. And it really kind of brought my attention to politics and the American system. And having a lot of experience in other countries, I started comparing what we go through to what other countries go through, and kind of just had some opportunities to compare and contrast the system here in the United States versus those of other countries, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in Americans for Election Reform?
Well, so that was, oh gosh, it was, you know, I always told myself, I need to do something. 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 And my parents are a big inspiration to me. And my mother, who was the original Dr. Jennings, and her doctorate is in educational psychology. Back in 2010, there was an election for the Texas State Board of Education, which is a really, really important political group, because they get to determine a lot about textbooks, not only in Texas, but even around the country. So she kept saying somebody needs to run against the person who is currently in office. And then she told me one day, she said, I realized I was somebody, so I'm going to do it. And so she ran in 2010 as a Democrat for the Texas State Board of Education. And 2010 was not the year for Democrats anywhere in the country, but especially not in Texas, to win long shot races like that. So she ended up, of course, losing. But I was really kind of proud of her. You know, she saw something that needed to be done, and she stepped in and did it. So obviously, with the political contentiousness, I believe is the polite way to put this, from the Trump years, I kind of had that similar, you know, somebody needs to do something about this. I guess I am somebody. So I sat down and I kind of wrote out the positions that I had about elections and how elections are run and how elections should be run, and just kind of wrote out this this list of things that I wanted to see changed. And you know, I kind of talked around with it with some friends and family, and you know, Facebook and Twitter and all these things. And I wrote down, and I had this kind of core group of 5 or 6 things that I was like, if we could change this, if we could change these things, then elections in this country would run so much better. And, you know, kind of the overall, the one sentence message that I wanted to get across with this group was every American should vote and every vote should count equally. Because the kind of haphazard way that we're currently doing things just results in so many problems and issues. So I started this group, Americans for Election Reform. It was actually my wife that came up with the name. And, you know, I started posting on Facebook and on Twitter and just talking to as many people as I could about these election reform issues. And it's been difficult because, you know, on the list of kind of sexy, fun, interesting topics that you can get a lot of people to kind of jive with and engage with you, election reform is not towards the top of that list. It's made it a little difficult to get people kind of excited and interested and everything. But, you know, I'm doing my best.
Excellent. Excellent. So kindly explain what your organization is doing to advance those and specifically the beliefs you have about election reform.
So we have a lot of different kind of positions on election reform, but if I had to pick the biggest one, the most important one, it's an end to first past the post voting.
I'm sorry, the end to what?
The end to first past the post voting.
First past the post voting, okay.
Yes. You know, I'm sure because you guys are doing a lot of third-party stuff, I'm sure you've heard of first past the post voting, but just in case, first past the post voting is basically, you know, the voter goes in, picks one person for the position, votes for that person, and then the person that gets the most votes wins. That's kind of the traditional method of doing elections that we have in most of the country, or, well, it's a traditional method in all of the country. Luckily, there are two states, Maine and Alaska, not exactly the most populous states, but we got to start somewhere, who have gotten rid of first past the post voting. And both of those two states do a variation on what's called ranked choice voting, which is where instead of going in and picking, you know, I want Bob Smith, you rank the available candidates. And in Alaska, it's the top four. In Maine, I think it can be any number, as many as make the ballot. But you say, okay, I want this person as my first choice, but if they don't win, I want this other person as my second choice, and then this other person is my third choice, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then what those states do is they get all the votes in, and they count up everybody's first choice vote. And if anybody gets 50% plus one, that person wins. But if nobody gets 50%, they drop the lowest vote getter. So if there are four options, they drop the person who's in fourth place. And then all the people who put that fourth place person as their first choice, it goes to their second choice. And they recalculate the votes again. And if anybody has 50% plus one, they win. If not, they eliminate the third place, right? So you keep eliminating the people in last place, and the voters who put those people at the top of their list, you get their second choice and then their third choice and then their fourth choice, until you get somebody who has more than 50%. And, you know, much like your the title of your podcast suggests, third parties are a great thing. I really, really want third parties in this country. I want fourth parties. I want fifth parties. I want 10th parties. But until we get rid of first past the post voting, we're never going to have a third party or a fourth party or a fifth party. And anybody who says otherwise is lying to you. I mean, I hate to say it, but the only real effective way we can get third, fourth, fifth parties is to get rid of first past the post voting. That needs to be priority number one. And again, luckily, voters in Maine and voters in Alaska have already done it. And so it's part of our goal at Americans for Election Reform to get that to happen in the other 48 states.
So how do you plan to enact these changes? Do you plan to do it on a state-by-state level, since you mentioned Maine and Alaska, or do you plan to do it locally with a constitutional amendment? Or what technique?
We would support all of the above. Right now, the biggest problem we're facing is that people don't know. People don't understand that there are other options. I'm a big fan of the voting rights legislation going through Congress right now. There's a ban on gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is a horrible, horrible practice. Automatic voter registration. Big fan of automatic voter registration. So there's progress being made on a lot of these kind of voting fronts. More and more states are passing laws that make it easier to vote. California just the other day passed a law creating permanent mail-in voting, like a few other states already have. I know Washington, Utah, a couple other states have a permanent, where they mail a ballot to every registered voter. And that's a great idea. So progress is being made, but especially with the first past the post issues, and trying to develop ranked choice voting and getting those passed. Honestly, priority number one is just education. We have to get people to understand that first past the post is not the only possible method of voting out there. And there is progress being made. So as I said, Maine and Alaska, also New York City, for all city elections, they're now using they're now using ranked choice voting to do their city elections. And they did that for the first time, I think it was last year, or it might have been, I think it was 2020. Might have been earlier this year. I can't remember. But anyway, the point is, they're finally kind of implementing these more effective methods of voting all over the country. Sometimes it's cities, sometimes it's counties, and thankfully we're starting to get to the point where we've got a few states. And I was really sad. It was on the ballot in 2020 in Massachusetts, and it failed. And I was really, really sad to see that. Obviously, the presidential race in 2020 was very important, and the Senate and the House and everything. But as far as state voting issues or state constitutional amendments were going, that was one of the two I was really looking at, and was really hoping would pass. And the other one was in Alaska, where they did pass the ranked choice voting. So that'll take effect, I believe, in 2022 for the state of Alaska. But I was real disappointed that Massachusetts didn't do it, because ranked choice voting is hopefully the future of voting. And if we want the ability to really vote for someone, the ability to have multiple options than just Republican and Democrat, we need to have that kind of ability to do something other than just the first past the post, pick one. So, we would love to see more cities, more counties, more states passing these kind of laws. But honestly, we just need to teach people what's out there. So a lot of what I do in Facebook and Twitter and in person, and in my college courses, I teach criminal justice, which isn't exactly political science, but there are ways you can kind of talk about politics and elections and things in a criminal justice classroom. But one of the things I always try to educate people about is there are different methods of doing this than what we do. The fact that we as Americans have grown up with this system, and it's really the only system we have experience with, doesn't mean it's the only possible way to do it. I forget who said it, but some famous person once said, the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, that's how we've always done it. So, I'm just trying to get the word out, which is one of the reasons I really appreciate you contacting me about this. The more I can get out and talk to people about it, the better.
We're glad to provide you the opportunity. That's what we're
Absolutely.
all about. We have people in the audience who are since takers, and they may start organizations themselves, or they may want to get inside an organization and assume a leadership position. So kindly explain your role in your organization, you did mention it at the start how you founded it. Kindly explain what it involves to start an organization like yours and what the day-to-day or whatever time you devote to it entails.
Okay. Well, we're still pretty small. And one of the biggest problems is if you start taking money and spending money, the legal requirements, if I were to start raising money, would be complicated. So as such, I don't accept donations or money at all. Anything that I pay for comes out of my own kind of private pocket. But just kind of being focused on social media and posting, there's not really a lot of expense there. I don't have a physical building. I don't have employees. Everything that's done is either done by me or by volunteers. So I at this point, I'm keeping it very simple. I've thought about doing, taking donations in order to do like boosted posts on Facebook, and buying ads on, Twitter and other kind of social media sites to try to, increase that audience. But again, it's really tough because election reform is kind of not a very, sexy issue, if you will. But it's one that I think is really important. So I'm able to spend some time doing it. And most of the time I put into it is, 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there. If I'm scrolling in social media and I see somebody else has created something that is kind of, pro-voting or anti-voter ID laws or anti-gerrymandering, it takes 2 seconds to click share this to my page. So a lot of it is just kind of a little bit here, a little bit there. I really wish I had more volunteers to create my own content. One of the best things you can do if you're running a social media organization is create your own content and make it interesting and make it something people want to engage with. And having a full-time job and I am a member of a few different boards and organizations, and I don't have as much time to devote to this as I would like. So if I could find volunteers, which again is a very difficult thing to do, I would just have them start creating kind of original posts, original graphics, original whatever, that are enticing to the public that don't necessarily care about these things to engage with. Because it's all about getting people's eyes onto your information and ingesting it and understanding with it and recognizing that it's important and finding some way to really engage them. And if people see something that's just kind of boring, they're just going to scroll right on past. So that's the biggest challenge right now. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just kind of the day-to-day methods of running a very, very small but growing organization like this. Money is an issue I don't want to tackle yet. And volunteers to create content are tough to find. Those are the kind of the two big lessons I've learned.
So how can our audience out there support your organization? You mentioned you want to find volunteers. So would that be one way to support your organization? And what else, if anything, can people
Absolutely.
do for your organization?
If your listeners wanted to volunteer, I would absolutely love to talk to them, and they're free to message me. Again, because of time issues, and I have a full-time job and numerous volunteering organizations, I'm only on Facebook and Twitter right now. I've been told by my students that I should probably get on TikTok. That's the big thing for kids these days. And of course, we want to find young people. We want to get young people interested in these issues. And apparently the young people are on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat. But, I just turned 40. I don't have the kind of the young person skills to know what I'm doing in those areas. But if they wanted to volunteer, I would love to talk to them. But other ways to help are just, subscribe, like the pages on Twitter and Facebook. Try to share that material, look through it, and we have a lot of different positions about voting, and a lot of people are going to agree with some of them and not others. And that's okay. We don't mind. If you only agree with this organization about one thing, we still want your support. We still want you to get out there and fight like heck to support that one thing that we can both agree on. So if there's anything that you see on our page that you want to share, please share it. Please talk to other people about what you're learning. That's the other big thing is come to Americans for Election Reform, come to other organizations. There are lots of organizations that do kind of a very similar thing. Go to all of them, learn as much as you can about these issues, and then talk to other people about it. We need to be able to discuss these issues knowledgeably and be able to say, like, you need to go up to somebody who says, oh, I want a third party. Why can't we have third parties in this country? We need to be able to walk up to them and say, hey, you want third parties? Me too. Here's how we can do it. First past the post voting is kind of what creates this game theory situation in which we're forced into a two-party situation because of vote stealing and all these things. So teach them about ranked choice voting and how great it is, and tell them, hey, you want ranked choice voting so we can have third parties? Call your state congressman, call your state senator. Those local state level people are going to be much more available to listen to you. And if you say, hey, I voted for you, and I would really like it if you added a ranked choice voting plank to your kind of personal platform so that we can get this done, the more we can get people engaged that way, the better. So please, just on Twitter, I'm oh gosh, what is my handle on Twitter? See, you're asking me the tough questions here.
I can find that and put that in the show notes. That shouldn't be a problem. So you don't have to worry about finding that right now.
I think it's at Reform Americans. And then on Facebook, it's just Americans for Election Reform. And we'd love to have any engagement people are willing to provide.
Wonderful. Super. Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing with us what you're doing and how we can change our election system.
Absolutely. Anytime. I love talking to people like this and reaching out to voters and educating people. It's why I'm a teacher. I like engaging with people. So thank you so much for inviting me. I wish you absolutely the best of luck with your podcast. I know how hard it is to do this kind of, developing an audience kind of thing. So anything I can do to help you, let me know.
Sounds like a plan. So also all the best to you and your organization.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye now.
All right. Thank you. Bye.